Hey everyone, this is Alan Schimmel and you're watching TechStrong TV. Today's September 24th and we hope you are having a great week. Week's almost over. We only got 1 week left in September. I'm having a hard time getting my head around that. It's just another month flying by. Having fun when you're dealing with COVID, I guess. Still most of us are working from home or not really going out much, and for good reason. Other in parts of the world, we're seeing a resurgence of the rates going up here in the U.S. We've kind of plateaued, but they haven't really gone down. Over 200,000 people dead. It's amazing. It's just amazing, and we still don't really seem to have a plan. But I'm not here to talk about COVID. We're here to talk about DevOps and cloud native and cybersecurity and digital transformation, and we have a lot of that in store for you today. Let me tell you a little bit about what we've got. I've got David Lees, who's from Basis Technologies. Basis is a company that's been around a while. Those in the who use SAP in the SAP world probably are pretty familiar with Basis. They're a leading player in that market. David is going to talk to us about SAP and DevOps, digital transformation. It's a great conversation. We had a roundtable earlier this week, of course, with our friends at SAP and Tricentis and Cognizant, a few others around this very subject. And, we sometimes forget how big a role SAP plays at the biggest organizations in the world. So it's a good conversation. After David, I'm really happy to have a conversation brought to you that I had with Gaurav Gupta, who is a partner at Lightspeed Ventures, but prior to that has been with Elastic and Splunk and a few others. And Gaurav is going to talk to us about, how does one go about being a VC? What is the skill set? How do you break into that? And what it's like being a VC, as well as we had a really good conversation about 3 of his present investments. One is Panther Labs, which is a sort of cloud-based SIM. One is Hasura, and one is Grafana, which we've covered here, of course, with our friend Raj Dutt a number of times on TechStrong TV. So good conversation with Gaurav. I think you're going to like it. After that, we're going to go to something old. And for something old, it's not actually too old, we're going to go back to the DevOps India Summit, which we co-produced with Zalento, just about 2 or 3 weeks ago, the beginning of September. And I did a keynote there, and it's about DevSecOps, the new normal, and kind of how the mission is changing, the attack surface is changing, and what we need to do. So we're going to be replaying my keynote from DevOps India Summit on DevSecOps. I hope you'll enjoy that. Then after that, we're actually going to have Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor, go over some of the news and headlines for today on our Media Ops sites, as well as Charlene will be doing a webinar preview for some upcoming webinars and an interview with Ryan Ellis, SVP of Product Management at Salesforce. After that, I will be back. We'll introduce Mitch over at the Analyst Corner. And Mitch has a good interview today with Alex Hidalgo, site reliability engineer, cloud influencer, and author of more than 20 publications and talks on SRE. Alex is a well-known expert in the SRE space. And Alex just joined our friends at Noble 9, Kit Merker and the team. And so Mitchell had a chance to catch up with Alex on that. Prior to that, though, Mitch is going to give a little commentary on auditing and how the data often present or generated as data exhaust can be valuable. One man's rags is another riches, right? And he'll talk to us about that. And then I'll be back to wrap things up. It's another full Thursday here on TechStrong TV. Let's take a message from a sponsor, and we'll be right back with David Lees of Basis Technologies. You know, sometimes in the DevOps space, we lose sight of how big companies like SAP, ServiceNow, and others, what their influences are at the largest enterprises, just how entrenched they are. It was brought home to me earlier this week when we did a roundtable for DevOps Unbound on DevOps and SAP, and man, the amount of registrations and questions and interaction with the audience. Uh, SAP's alive and well and driving so much IT at much of the large enterprises in the world. Basis Technologies has been working in the SAP space for many, many years. We caught up with David Lees of Basis, who's going to give us an update on what's happening in the world of SAP DevOps, the digital transformation. So here's my conversation with David Lees.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on another segment here for TechStrong TV. In this segment, we are joined by David Lees. David is the CTO at Basis Technologies. And David, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Thanks, Alan. Great to be here.
Great to have you here. So David, I don't think we've done an interview here with Basis Technologies before, so I think we should start right there.
Okay. So,
go ahead.
Basis is a company that's been around for about 20 years. We are a global organization that works with hundreds of customers around the world, and the thing that they all have in common is that they run SAP software, as I'm sure many of your audience do.
Yep.
We specialize in solutions around the application lifecycle management space. We kind of started up the whole trend in terms of the DevOps for SAP by really helping people to manage their change in a much more agile way than SAP is traditionally known for.
Excellent. And of course, David, we were talking off camera before we got started. I'm doing DevOps.com 7 years. Right, and when I first started, everyone said, "Oh, DevOps is something for startups. I don't know about large organizations." And then, sure enough, not every, but most large organizations in the world started recognizing the benefits of doing things, in a DevOps fashion. And we fought this battle with, DevOps in the mainframe, DevOps on things like SAP. Well, how could something like SAP benefit, from DevOps? But of course they can. Of course they can. And I think SAP themselves has recognized it, and they've come out with a lot of DevOps-related solutions, products, services. But also companies like Basis, right, are recognizing that, hey, my customers are asking me about DevOps, but they're not going to throw away tens of millions of dollars and years of tribal knowledge that they've developed in doing things on SAP. It's just impractical. And so, they have to put a little chocolate in the peanut butter. And it's got to work together, right? So, and I would imagine, Basis this is a real specialty that the market's calling for, and Basis has a real role to fulfill here.
Yeah, I think it's as relevant in the SAP world as it is elsewhere for exactly the same reasons. Customers are looking to become more agile. They want to be able to deploy in kind of just in time, moving away from the whole annual or 6-monthly mega release delivered in a very waterfall way in order to respond to market changes, customer needs, in order to drive more efficiency within their application development and application management space, and to deliver that with quality that a business critical system like SAP mandates, to be honest.
Sure. So, David, I always like to ask our guests a little bit about their own personal background because people out here are wondering, right? So, they look at David Lees, he's CTO of Basis Technologies. They've been around 20 years in the SAP space, they deal a lot. David, what's your personal background like?
So I actually joined Basis only about 18 months ago, and prior to that, I spent the majority of my career on the other side of the fence. I was with Procter and Gamble, large global consumer goods company,
Sure.
and pretty much most of that time was connected to SAP in some shape or form, from implementations through support, upgrades, getting ready for transformation to things like S/4HANA. And it was in that role as a customer that I first came across Basis a few years ago and actually brought in one of their products into Procter and Gamble. So I kind of first had that experience as a customer of Basis before deciding to kind of make the step into to working here as CTO.
Excellent. So you literally have a career in SAP that you bring to Basis, and as you said, from the other side of the fence, not as a vendor, but as a user, a consumer, customer
Yeah,
of SAP.
and like you were saying before, I think many of the customers of SAP that have been running with SAP software for now tens, if not 20 plus years, have developed the knowledge, they've developed their solutions and their processes exactly how they like them, but that's come with massive investment in custom code, custom solutions, investment in the way they're managing those developments, those projects, and maintaining them on a going basis. And so I lived through firsthand this whole life cycle, let's say, plus the last few years where the old way of managing things was simply not going to be the right way to continue to manage in the future, because at the end of the day, while the rest of the architecture around SAP is evolving at a much faster rate, you can't kind of retain the kind of the bottleneck image that SAP has, and you have to find a way of breaking that bottleneck and being able to move at a similar pace to the other elements in the architecture. It's not as easy as saying, okay, well, let's just not touch the back end and keep that totally frozen. It's simply not possible. You need to make as many changes in your supply chain and finance and legal entity structure, etc., as you do in your e-commerce platform.
Fair enough. Excellent. Again, the parallels to what we saw in the mainframe space is also that, but I think there's something else you got to remember. People don't use SAP just because of their prior investment or just because it's what they've done before, right? Organizations of a certain size use SAP because it offers real advantages and allows you to do things in such a way that you can't have or you can't get with just about any other solution out there. So it's not just because this is what my grandpa did or this is what we've done for 10 years, 20 years. It's because we are an organization of a certain scale, right? That we require
SAP,
this.
yeah, I think they're a market leader for a reason,
For reasons,
and that's because they have the products that, like you say, run some of the largest enterprises in the world, many of the Fortune 500 or FTSE 100 or what have you. And it's in spite of that we need to find a way of being able to manage that in a much more modern way. There's certain elements of SAP that I'm sure some of your kind of more pure DevOps listeners or audience would struggle to understand. Yeah, in terms of, for example, the way version management is handled in SAP inside like a single database, hard to manage branches in terms of parallel developments, the way changes are deployed through the use of things like transports, create to some extent an ecosystem in SAP that is different than a lot of the cloud native and more modern applications. But at the same time, we want to be able to help customers to manage the risk, to manage the agility, and to be able to move things through with confidence and with speed in keeping their changes across their architecture orchestrated in a controlled way.
Absolutely. So, David, if you don't mind, I think we've laid the groundwork here well. Let's look at, if you will, the anatomy of a SAP DevOps engagement, right? We spoke about, maybe it's an existing SAP customer who, right, doing that big yearly release or twice a year release is not going to cut it anymore. They need to be more agile, nimble agile, not necessarily agile software development, though that too. But they need to be more nimble. They need to be more responsive. They want to utilize a modern CI/CD pipeline
Yeah.
type of delivery system.
And I think as with anything here, you've got the three normal components. It's about the people, the process, and the tools. So there's no kind of silver bullet that's going to say, yeah, I'm suddenly DevOps in my SAP space. You need to have similar best practices around automating as much as possible within that pipeline. Some of that's available natively inside SAP to do things like automated unit testing, automated code inspection. But the piece of the jigsaw, let's say, where we come in is to create effectively the pipeline portion for SAP using one of our products called Active Control. And that's about being able to deploy in an automated way within the landscape to the point where the customer is comfortable, and being able to kind of highlight and manage all of the interdependencies or identify where it is safe or isn't safe to move changes in a more accelerated way. So I think some of the best practices are, I would say, common across the SAP and the cloud native world. And when it comes down to some of the tooling, you need to start looking at SAP specific tooling where it's not possible to leverage some of the kind of off-the-shelf open source best practice tools like best of breed ones such as Jenkins or Git. But equally, this is where we can integrate and we can help a customer in managing their SAP side of their estate, their architecture, in a coordinated or orchestrated way with the non-SAP world that they're managing using some of these more traditional DevOps-based pipeline tools or CI/CD tools.
Yep, agreed. So David, when basis comes in, let's talk about the engagement now, right? Is it more of a like a classic consulting where we come in with bodies, or is it more of an architectural and here's the processes and kind of maybe software we're going to introduce, or both?
Yeah, so we are primarily a software company in terms of providing the solutions, although we do recognize and we do work with some of our customers that they also need help on what are the process changes or architectural changes that they should make in order to go further, in order to become more agile. What are some of the, again, best practices that they should be doing that without switching on or without investing in, they won't be able to go as far as they want to or need to So whilst we are today primarily a software company, and we will come in to help our customers activate those solutions and deploy them, we are starting to kind of branch out a little bit more into the consulting side to help customers on that journey, to define what that journey looks like for them based on where they are today and based on where they want to get to.
Fair enough. So I gotta kind of ask it only because you have to in these days. How's COVID affected all of this?
I think we're affected to some extent, like many companies. However, we are to a certain extent well insulated. We have a subscription-based model. So the companies that tend to deploy our solutions continue with those solutions. We have an incredibly high renewal rate, which we're very proud of. And that gives us a very strong cash flow and a very strong platform in which we can continue to invest in new products and solutions, as well as to continue to invest in identifying and adding new customers. I think to some extent there is some of the pursuits, some of our prospects have been impacted by budget restrictions, but I think at the same time, COVID is accelerating significantly the pace at which companies realize they need to transform. So I think it's probably as much as one side kind of slowdown and budget restrictions as it is kind of companies coming in saying we have to modernize, we have to change the way we're doing things, and we need our SAP application development to be as flexible as we have elsewhere in our organization.
Agreed. I kind of suspected that, but I wanted to kind of confirm it with you. Yeah, on the one hand, it definitely, everyone working remote and everything that went on, you could see it slowing down. But on the other hand, it becomes very much a catalyst for transformation, right? There's no waiting for tomorrow. We got to do this now, and so it happens in there. What about working remote though, David? I mean, you're obviously in your home office right now.
I am. I was always kind of set up in a home office in kind of gig here at basis. So I'm based in Spain, whereas the headquarters is in London. So even pre-COVID, I was kind of used to working a few weeks from home and then going into the office for a week or so every month. Now it's just all at home for the foreseeable future. We've had to adapt development teams that used to be very used to kind of working together, whiteboards and daily stand-ups and that sort of thing, have found ways of doing that remotely, like everyone else has had to do. And yeah, I think we're all getting used to a very interesting new world, and I would be very surprised if we go back to exactly how it was previously.
I don't disagree with you. But the good news is, you know what? You're still able to do your work. Stuff gets done. And could be worse, as they say. Hey, we're about out of time, but I wanted to mention one other subject. You guys are doing a webinar here on DevOps.com. It's probably about a month from now, maybe a little even more than a month from now. It's on SAP and DevOps. I'm not going to put you on the spot here and spill the whole beans, but who should be, talk to us about it.
I think the intended audience for that is people who are traditionally on the DevOps side of the fence, who've grown up outside of SAP, who need to or are realizing that SAP should become part of what they are including in their plans and in their strategies. Now, I would still say SAP kind of long timers would get some value out of that webinar, but it's more about helping people understand how SAP is relevant, why it's relevant, and how we can help customers bringing the SAP world together with the more modern side of the application house for customers. And so I think it's primarily tailored towards that audience.
Cool. More information on this will be available on devops.com under our webinar section. David, I look forward to that webinar. I want to thank you for joining us on TechStrong TV today. Where in Spain are you based, by the way?
Near Malaga on the south coast. So most of the
It's
time,
terrible.
like yourself in Florida.
Yeah, I was going to say in Boca Raton, I really can't complain either. But anyway, hey, thanks for joining us. Look forward to the webinar in October, and keep up the great work.
Great. Well, thanks a lot, Alan. I look forward to coming back on, talking to you again in the future.
Absolutely. David Lees, Basis Technologies, SAP and DevOps. It's real. It's something you need to be thinking about, especially if your organization is already an SAP shop. This is Alan Schimmel. We'll be right back with our next guest here on TechStrong TV. Our next guest is Gaurav Gupta. Gaurav, after a successful career at Splunk and Elastic and others, re-entered the VC world about a year and a half ago when he joined Lightspeed Ventures as a partner. Gaurav gives us his kind of what it's like to be a VC, and excellent conversation, as well as three of the portfolio companies that he led the investments in. One is Hasura, one is Panther Labs, which is a cloud-based SIM, and one is our friend Raj Dutt and the folks over at Grafana, who are doing so much with Loki and Prometheus and Grafana Labs. So it's a great conversation with Gaurav. I hope you'll enjoy it. Let's go to it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on another segment here for TechStrong TV. In today's segment, I'm actually joined by Gaurav Gupta. Gaurav is a partner, or actually, did I say partner? I don't know if that's the right term. But Gaurav is with Lightspeed Ventures. Gaurav, why don't you tell us your title so I don't mess it up?
Yeah, so hey, Alan, nice to meet you. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm a partner at Lightspeed. What that means is I'm an investor. So I work specifically on our early stage enterprise team. So, focused on seed, Series A, Series B investments, largely in enterprise infrastructure.
So before we jump into a little bit about recent investments you've done in the environment and everything, I want to address our audience out here, because I think there are a ton of young people, relatively young when you're my age anyway, who look at you and say, I want to be what he is when I grow up, or right, I want to be a VC. Look, my own son is going for his master's now, and he talks about it. Give people a little background. It's not, there's nothing in school that says, a VC, I'm majoring in being a VC or something like that. Give us a little background. How did you come to become, involved in the VC world?
Yeah. So, this is actually I've been at Lightspeed for about a year and a half, but actually, back in 2004, I worked in venture capital. So, earlier in my career, and, at that time, I studied computer science engineering. I was, really into technology, had worked at a couple of tech companies, and sort of the opportunity came across to just being able to look at across a lot of companies and learn about them, in those days especially, it was really only through connections that you could get these kinds of jobs, right? And of course, there's certain appeal to that. And I worked in more of a kind of an analyst associate role, and quickly realized that while it was interesting and fun, that it was a lot harder job than you might think to be successful at. To be part of the great companies, to convince those founders and entrepreneurs that you can really add value and help guide them, and be a good partner, it was hard to do when you're pretty early in your career, at least for me. And so I then, after that, went to business school and kind of came out of business school saying, rather than being an investor, it's time for me to actually go build something and build empathy with founders and entrepreneurs. So I did that really for the last 10 years at a couple of companies. I'm sure we'll talk about them: Splunk, Elastic. And then it was after that I was doing some of my own advising and angel investing, was taking some time off, and realized actually it's the right time in my career to sort of jump back into venture capital. And it was a time where I had decided that I wanted to spend time with not just one company, with multiple companies, but that I could also be of real help, given my prior operating experience. So that's how I ended up in there. And, basically over the last 10 years, have been interacting with VCs and investors and entrepreneurs, right? And so you sometimes you're helping them with diligence. Sometimes they're interested in talking to you as an expert. But that really kind of gave me a view of the world, and also probably some of the contacts to sort of, land this gig here at Lightspeed.
Sure. So I've been involved in venture-backed startups for 25 years. I was very lucky. I sold my first startup to a guy named Brad Feld. I don't know if you know Brad at Foundry. Yep. And back then, Brad was at SoftBank, but he was the CEO chairman of the company that bought my company. And I worked with Brad pretty much ever since, and every company I was involved with, Brad was kind of the lead VC, whether it was at SoftBank or Mobius or then Foundry. And so I was kind of spoiled a little bit, because Brad is sort of a unique individual when it comes to VCs. But my experience with VCs is, you get kind of young guys who like pretty much, I imagine what you were in 2004, where the kind of deals you're chasing fall into two camps. One are, real potential blue chip 10-bagger kind of companies, but you do have to convince them, what are you bringing more than money? Right? It's not just writing a check. What are you going to do for us to, succeed and fulfill our dreams and hopes and wishes here, to trust you with our baby? The other people you pursue are people who are just desperate for money and will grab any money they can. But oftentimes, those are, companies that maybe have less of a likelihood of success. Maybe their founding team's less experienced or less talented, skilled, what have you, or the idea is not as mature, or whatever. So it's kind of that ultimate catch-22. How can I get the experience without getting experience? And it does. I think you have to walk a mile in the shoes of an entrepreneur, of living that life, right on the other side of the table, so to speak. And I think that's something that Brad never lost, right? Having started as an entrepreneur, and he still considers himself one. And I think it's important. And there's so many of our audience out here. These are talented, skilled people who want to start companies, who want to raise money, who want to, found companies, and they don't. It sometimes amazes me the immaturity or the lack of knowledge, experience in what it really takes to be a VC and what it really takes to start and found a company, to raise money, and ultimately, be successful. So, more power to you, man.
I will say, a lot of what I found helpful, really being an investor is about, you have to really build trust with the founders and executives that you're working with. You're potentially going to be on their board. You're going to be guiding them to make decisions. So that trust building exercise is a lot easier when you have a little bit of empathy for what they've gone through. But I will say, in joining a VC firm, you also have the trust with your partners. And for example, at Lightspeed, I first met the partners in 2008. So it's really and kind of meeting them on a consistent basis year over year, getting to know them getting to know me through ups and downs. A lot of these jobs are like that, where they are 10-year interview processes, effectively. And so, I believe in taking time to make some of these important decisions. So
agreed. And I don't think there's a substitute for time either. There's no shortcut there. Anyway, you mentioned you were at Splunk, you were at Elastic, computer science background. I mean, certainly having that sort of experience and background doesn't hurt, as they say, with what you're doing. You've been almost a year and a half at Lightspeed, and you've been involved in about 3 deals so far, correct? If you don't mind, tell us a little bit about them.
Yeah. So my first investment's investment. It's one that I'm in love with. Of course, it was a technology that I was familiar with from my past. It's a company called Grafana. So, Grafana Labs is the company. Grafana is sort of the most popular open source project that they are kind of the steward of. It's a open source kind of user interface for metrics and monitoring, sort of the broader category people are calling observability. In addition to Grafana, there are a couple of other projects there that they are heavily involved with. One of them is called Prometheus, which is sort of an underlying time series database. Cortex, which goes along with Prometheus, allows it to scale, and then Loki is a logging project. And so, really, the vision for Grafana is to bring together all the various pillars of observability, and come together with like kind of an open and composable observability stack. So really being that open source provider. And so led the Series A investment in that company. Although I would say the company, really has been actually around for the last 4 or 5 years and didn't raise a lot of money. Kind of grew organically. But when they saw themselves scaling pretty quickly, they decided to take venture capital to scale even faster. So that
as we were talking off camera, we're lucky enough. We had Raj Dutt on, I think, twice in the last month, talking about Grafana. And look, the whole observability space is just on fire right now, right? And it's driven. A lot of it's driven with open source, where even companies like New Relic, public company, right, is coming, it's calling what they're doing now observability, and they're looking to work with open telemetry and Prometheus and a lot of these open source projects now, right, riding the back of that. And Grafana is right in the mix of it. Raj seems like he has it down. If I'm not mistaken, from what he had told us, he's the CEO. His co-founder actually started the Grafana project, and that was years ago, right?
Yeah.
I mean, significantly before.
In 2014 or 15. So actually, there's some interesting history there. The Grafana project is actually, it's technically a fork of the Kibana project, which is a project at Elastic. And actually, it was very friendly the Kibana project was going more in terms of sort of the direction of logging, and was joining Elastic, the company at the time, and Torkel, who's based in Sweden,
Yes.
wanted to take kind of a different approach and sort of focus more on metrics. And so there was no conflict or anything. And actually today I don't think there's any code that's shared between Grafana and Kibana, but there is that shared history. And so of course it was I was always aware of sort of what was going on with Grafana, being at Elastic, and track the company, and had been really impressed with raising almost no money and become what I would say is probably the ubiquitous user interface for kind of observability, at least on the open source side. And what's really, I'd say, unique about the strategy is that, unlike many of the other observability vendors, they're not trying to be everything to everyone, right? They're not saying, hey, you should use us for everything, we're the best at everything. What they're saying is that, look, we're a layer on top that can tie together a set of best-of-breed solutions, right? And I think that's really unique. And so you can use Grafana with Prometheus for metrics, but you could use it with Splunk or Elastic for logging if you want, or you could use their logging offering, which is Loki. So there is this, I think, what I think is the future, which is like more and more folks want flexible modular systems that
no
lock them into.
Right. You don't want to be locked in. And that's, that's the arm in arm with the whole open source model, right? Is you shouldn't be locked in. And I the little things you find out when you do these interviews, right? Go figure. But then I remembered he had mentioned his partner. Anyway, great company, Grafana, big stuff happening with them, and we look forward to it. So it sounds like you got one winner already. Talk to us about the other two.
Yeah, sure. So the second one I'll talk to you about is a company called Hasura, Hasura. Led the Series B investment in that company. And really the origin of that investment, maybe I'll just tell you a little bit about the investment thesis. So is that for the last year after joining, sort of Lightspeed, I became fascinated by a kind of a movement that's been coined called Jamstack, JavaScript APIs and market. Really this idea that applications can be sitting out in the edge. Maybe the code is stored in GitHub. Everything about it. We move it to the edge. Things are faster and more secure. And you're not really running with your traditional application server tier and sort of central point that oftentimes makes it really difficult to not only create an application but launch the application. And so we've seen like a lot of static sites take off using this next gen set of technologies. And so some of those technologies on the front end are things like React, but also the things, frameworks like Gatsby and Next.js. And, to me, it became more and more clear that this is the future. There are just so many advantages. It's much easier to build applications. There's performance advantages, there's security advantages, et cetera. Now, there are a number of companies playing here, but really, I believe that this technology will move into the traditional enterprises eventually. But in order to do that, a lot of these enterprises are not just building static websites or content-related applications. They're building dynamic applications, and in order to build those dynamic applications, they have to integrate with the data that these companies have. And most of the data that these companies have is locked up in relational databases, whether it's Postgres or MySQL or Oracle. And so what Hasura does is it provides an interface between these traditional databases, and it exposes a GraphQL interface. And GraphQL is, kind of think of it as a next-gen way for applications to talk to data, right? And more traditionally, what you'd have to do is build a REST API layer, right, to do that. And Hasura sort of leverages kind of the next-gen technology, which is GraphQL, which is more efficient in a variety of ways, but then also helps with things like security and caching and rate limiting and governance, things that people still need if they're going to have front-end mobile apps or web apps talk to underlying databases. And so it's an open source project that's got a lot of traction, really, really large community, people who are very enthusiastic. And so that was part of the bet. And then they recently started monetizing with selling to large enterprise customers, companies like United Healthcare, Philips, et cetera. They have a on-prem enterprise offering and then also a cloud offering.
Excellent. Good stuff. Good stuff there. And we'll do the third.
Yeah, sure. So the third is a company called Panther. So it's Panther Labs is the formal name. The URL is runpanther.io in case you're interested in checking it out. And so this is a company in the security space. And actually, I guess I tried to stay not stray too far from kind of things I know and things I feel strongly, deeply about. So, I'd seen multiple disruptions of an area of security called SIEM, Security Information and Event Management. It's this area of security where you're collecting all the telemetry from all your different security devices into one place. So
20 years in security. I know all about it.
You know all about it, right? So. Yeah. This area has gotten disrupted it's been around for a while, but it's gotten disrupted, and probably the most recent disruptor was Splunk, the company I was at. And one of the things they did is they realized the volume of data was increasing, the kinds of queries you needed to do on the data, and they introduced a different architecture than what a lot of the existing vendors had before, and managed to. Now they're a leader in the Magic Quadrant when before they weren't even playing in that market. And so I see a similar pattern here with Panther. What's happened sort of in the security space is actually the volumes of data have grown exponentially, and there's more and more of a need to collect everything. On top of that, security groups and security practitioners, it's no more longer just about being a checkbox on a CISO's list. They deeply care about actually doing threat detection, right? And finding these guys, because if there is a breach, it can cost a company millions of dollars in their reputation. And so, you're also seeing security practitioners become more technical, right? And so a lot of times you have developers becoming security people, or security people, learning languages like Python, for example. And so Panther's really a product that I think it represents sort of the next gen SIEM, right? It's built for the cloud. It's built entirely using serverless technology. It uses things like Snowflake and S3 as its backend storage mechanism, so it can really scale without too many people in operations. It's also extremely developer friendly, so it supports. You can build detections and things using Python. It supports SQL to query the data, so you don't have to learn any custom languages. And then it just works out of the box. It's really designed for public cloud environments like AWS or GCP or Azure, and so it can collect telemetry and kind of bootstrap your environment for those cloud environments very quickly. And so I've been in this industry for a while, and this sort of is like the product I feel like the world needs in the future. And so that was the reason behind the Series A investment there.
Excellent. Last week I had a chance to interview Christian. I think it's Christian Beadle. Christian's the co-founder, CTO at Sumo Logic. And they of course went. Yep, they went public last week, and we interviewed them the day of their IPO. What was interesting, and we talked about it, and I've known this, is that the founding team at Sumo Logic was very much the founding team at ArcSight, right? And these are the folks who maybe the first or second generation of SIEM. I always thought they got bought directly by HP, but Christian reminded me they had actually gone public for about a year or two before HP bought them. But then when they did Sumo, it was interesting because they didn't set out to be a quote-unquote security company, right? It was more doing things doing things better than they did at ArcSight, but not just for security. I remember Splunk when they were better known for the cool things they said on their black T-shirts than the product itself, if you remember back in those days, right? And again, it wasn't all about security for Splunk. It was about collecting data, right? Being just the ability to be able to collect all this different kind of data. Same thing with Sumo. Sounds like a similar thing with Panther.
Yeah, I mean, really, when I was at Splunk, we actually had very little business and security. It was mostly focused on application troubleshooting, but it was really the architectural and product approach that happened to apply to security. And I think, ultimately, a lot of the SIM category it's really just it's another kind of log, right, and metric that's coming out of a system. It happens to be extremely voluminous, right? And so,
and increasingly so.
You do find a lot of these companies that do log analytics, you're veering towards security for that reason. The money is there, right? There's also an urgency to purchase and solve that problem. And so,
I think so. Here's my take on it, and I'm not a VC, but I do talk to a few amount of people. I think what happens is the people who develop companies with these kinds of technologies, they become infatuated with the potential money and business that doing it for security reasons alone can do. And so they tend to gravitate there because there's money there, right? And not only is there money there, there's a tremendous need there. We need this kind of technology to make us more secure. But here's, I think, another thing that affects the industry, and I'm interested in your take, Rob, is even with Splunk's new architecture, it was, except for the biggest companies, it's almost too expensive to log everything, to monitor, to intake all of that data. It costs you a fortune, even using cloud and everything else. So you got to kind of pick your spots in terms of what information do I want to take in and analyze and do my thing with. And so in that scenario, I think security rises to the top of the heap as probably the best bang for the buck in what information I take in and what I'm going to use it for. I think in a perfect world, people would like to open the spigots and collect everything, right? If somehow there wasn't this prohibitive cost around it, they would collect everything. Just because they can. What they would do with it, I don't know. But I think that is a reason why, even though these companies may not start off quote unquote as security companies, they ultimately gravitate towards a security audience.
Yeah, I would agree with you. They're definitely, if you're going to prioritize sort of high value, high impact use cases. Security oftentimes will rise to the top, or let's not shortcut that aspect of it. But I would say that the founder of Panther and some of the early employees worked at Airbnb and Amazon AWS, and so there they looked at Splunk, they looked at Elastic, they looked at Sumo Logic, and this is several years ago, right? So these guys were really at the cutting edge of volumes and the kinds of hackers and attackers they were seeing. And so they looked at these processes and said, hey, we actually at a minimum need to collect all this data, and ideally we collect all this other data as well. And oh, by the way, we need to go back and be able to go back and look at 18-month-old data if we really want to figure out what the root cause was that someone's been trying to attack us for the last year. And so they looked at these existing solutions and they sort of said, this isn't going to work, and even if it does theoretically, it's going to cost us way more than we could possibly spend. And so that's what led them to build their own open source solutions, which then led to the inspiration for Panther, right? And so I do believe it's a bit like observability, right? That you just don't know what you don't know what you don't know, right? And it's better to collect all the data because then you can actually do a retrospective and really understand what might have happened. If you don't collect the data, you'll never know.
Then, right. Then you're not even in it.
and cloud data warehouse technology like S3, Snowflake, Athena, which really dramatically reduces. Now, the problem with those existing sort of data warehouse technologies is never suited to real-time streams and security data and that. So we could never use that stuff. We had to build custom backends, right? Like what Splunk is, and we had to index all the data. It was very heavyweight. With these new technologies and new approaches, it is now viable to collect all the data and analyze it in real time and do a whole bunch of these things that people have been dreaming about. And this is kind of what a lot of these companies, these larger companies, built in-house. And so now, a lot of what we do as VCs is sort of say, hey, what did these larger companies who are at the forefront, who are probably 2 or 3 years earlier than everyone else do? Okay, let's see if we can then take that and productize it for the rest of the world, because they'll be there pretty soon.
SaaSize it. I agree with you. Gaurav, I got bad news. I told you 25 minutes. We're blowing past 30. I told you 15, 20, and we're blowing past 30. And we had a very ambitious agenda. We haven't even gotten to some of it. I need to invite you back on. We'll finish up with Panther, and then let's talk about investing during COVID and what, how VCs are operating and what you guys are looking for. We'd love to have you back here. This has been a great conversation, but we got, as often happens.
I get excited about my company, so.
So do I. Don't worry about it. That's why I come and do this every day. It's if you do this if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. So it's all good. Anyway, thank you for joining us. Come back. Let's finish our conversation. Gaurav Gupta, partner, Lightspeed Ventures, here on TechStrong TV. This is Alan Schimmel. We'll be right back with another interview. Up next is our something old today. It's really not that old. It's just from the recent DevOps India Summit that we co-produced with the folks at Zalentro. I keynoted there, and I spoke around DevSecOps, the new normal, how things have changed and what, how the mission and attack surfaces and tools we're using are changing in DevSecOps because of how COVID's changed the game. This is my discussion on that. I hope you'll enjoy it. So this is Alan Schimmel at DevOps India Summit on DevSecOps, the new normal.
As the founder, CEO, and editor-in-chief of MediaOps, the company behind DevOps.com, Container Journal, as well as the co-founder of the very prestigious DevOps Institute, our next keynote speaker is attuned to the world of technology, particularly cloud, DevOps, security, and open source. He's one of the most popular personalities in the security and technology community. Being a digital anarchist, he has assisted in building many technology companies by combining a strong business background with a deep knowledge of technology. In a few minutes from now, he'll bring to you his insights on DevSecOps, the new normal. Please put your hearts out as I now invite on the E-stage the one and only Mr. Alan Schimmel.
Hi, everyone. This is Alan Schimmel of DevOps.com. Welcome to the DevOps India Summit, and thanks for attending my session here today. I'll be talking about DevSecOps, the new normal. Everything has changed. And We're going to have a good discussion. But for those of you who may not be familiar with me, my name is, as I said, Alan Schimmel. I'm the editor-in-chief for DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, Container Journal, and these are all part of MediaOps, the company I founded about 7 years ago, and which I'm CEO of. I'm also the co-founder of the DevOps Institute, the Accelerated Strategies Group, Analyst Group, and our digital platform, Digital Anarchist. I host TechStrong TV 3 days a week, and within the DevOps and DevSecOps space, I get around. But if you haven't checked out any of the brands that fall under our MediaOps brands, please do. And thanks for joining us today. So DevSecOps, the new normal. Like most of you, the COVID-19 situation, calamity, has had a profound impact on our personal lives, on our professional careers, and on humanity as a whole. Never, in some ways, never before has all of humanity faced this one common enemy, one common threat. And no matter whether you're watching this in Bangalore, India, or Rome, or London, or New York, or San Francisco, or Sydney, Australia, or anywhere else in the world, all of us are concerned for our safety. All of us are concerned about what's happening with this terrible virus and disease. But it's had profound impact on our ability to work, on our ability to exist even. But here's the good news, if there is any good news in all this, is that for those organizations who had adopted a DevOps sort of framework or mindset, for those organizations that were already moving towards digital transformation, cloud transformation, for those organizations that had already adopted a DevSecOps posture or path, it's been a little bit easier to move to this all remote new way of doing things. In fact, some companies that we work with have thrived while going all remote, continuing to accelerate their pace of transformation, to deploy safely with better quality, faster. And I think it's within reach of every organization to do that if they adopt sound DevOps principles, including DevSecOps. But I also think that what we do in DevSecOps, how we do it, what the mission is, has fundamentally changed. As the slide says, everything is different now. But not only is it different now, I've been in technology 30 plus years. I've never seen technology go backwards, and I don't think it's going to go backwards this time. Whenever this new normal is or emerges, whenever it emerges and whatever it is, I know that it's going to be here to stay and we will go forward from there. We're not going to go back to the way things were in January or early February of 2020. We will go forward always. It's almost like as if time only goes in one direction, so does technology. So everything is different now, and we will not be going back. What does it mean for our future? Well, I don't know how many of you are watching this from your home. How many of you have been watching this from home even before COVID? I would imagine there's many more of you working from home now. In fact, here in the US, pretty much everyone was working from home for the last 4 or 5 months, and then most still are. But here's an interesting thing, and we learned it even here at MediaOps. It's okay. We can work from home, especially if you're in the knowledge industry, technology industry. We can work from home and still be effective. So one has to ask themselves, why go back to the office? What do we gain from being in the office? And yes, there is the so-called water cooler conferences. There is that face-to-face, human-to-human interaction, which I believe in and I still think is important. But in the greater scheme of things, it's an 80-20 rule. We still can be very, very effective working remotely. And I think the future is that people may come back. Some of us will go back to our offices full time. Others, though, and I think the majority, may go back to their office occasionally, 1, 2, perhaps 3 days a week. But the shift to remote work and working from home is not going away and will not go back. Just a point of fact, Gartner recent survey, 74% of CFOs will shift some employees to remote work permanently after the pandemic. Now, so that's almost 3/4 of all CFOs. And when they say shift some employees, I've seen that number fluctuate between 30 and 70%, depending on size of organization, how remote they were before this, and their particular job function. But this is going to fundamentally change so much of what we do in DevSecOps, in security, as well as technology, as well as society. Think about it. I wouldn't want to be selling commercial real estate leases right now. It's got to be a tough sell. Let's briefly take a look at what the traditional approach to security was prior to COVID, right? And if you're like, I don't know if you're like me, but as I mentioned, I've been in technology 30 plus years. I've been in security over 20, 25. And, it was always, number one, we were securing the device, that endpoint. We had antivirus, and then we, of course, had anti-malware, anti-phishing, FTE, security policies around passwords and versions and patch controls and upgrading, and MFA, which was a huge part of it. After securing that endpoint, right, it was a defense in depth, as we call it, layers. We had securing the network. And for many of us, that translated now into Wi-Fi access security, guest networks, VPNs, intrusion detection and prevention, firewalls, etc. And then the third part of it was securing applications. So we had things like single sign-on and MFA and conditional access and IP trust, and more importantly, AppSec. Right? I think the fundamental thing, or the biggest part of DevSecOps, was around AppSec, securing our applications. But DevSecOps brought a twist to the AppSec equation. For so long, or originally, AppSec, right, you had your web application firewalls, which was sort of post-deployment AppSec, if you will. And whether you are a fan of WAF or not, they're there, and they have been. But so much of AppSec started to evolve into penetration testing as a service, web application testing as a service, pre-deployment. And we kept, as we say, shifting left this AppSec, shifting AppSec left, right? Checking our code earlier and earlier, to the point of let's check that code as soon as we log it into our Git or whatever repository we're using, right? And so this whole idea of shift left with security, DevSecOps, GitOps, building security into it, really caught on before COVID. I will tell you, and this is something that we follow very closely at DevOps.com and Container Journal and Security Boulevard, that model of AppSec, of shifting it left, was really, I don't want to say becoming dominant, but it was becoming the norm. That was a best practices. Now, as a result of what we've seen in COVID and with teams working remotely, we've seen that best practice accelerated. It is now really the dominant way of developing, because the key part there was that this AppSec testing started to be automated, built into our software delivery pipeline and process, and developers and just testers, not just necessarily the security team, was able to initiate these scans and this test. And COVID or no COVID, fundamentally, that's what made DevSecOps as popular as it is, that it's the theme of this year's event, and it was the theme even before COVID. Now, our IT infrastructure world has changed. First of all, we've seen just, perhaps 6 years worth of cloud transformation migration over the last 6 months, right? So what that means is our on-premises infrastructure, not just security, but IT infrastructure, has become obsolete in a matter of months, right? If you're not moving it to the cloud right now, you're probably really suffering. And in moving it to the cloud, that changes some of our fundamental security assumptions, right? So for so many of us, security in the LAN, security at the office was based upon a Microsoft Active Directory infrastructure with domains, right? Domain control and stuff like that. We logged on predominantly through Windows. And it was easy, not easy, but we knew what the mission was, controlling our infrastructure on premises. We were able to build that perimeter around our infrastructure. We were able to build that perimeter around our users who were in the office. We were able to build that perimeter around our applications that were in the data center or the server closet in the office. And that's changed now, right? That in early March, in the blink of an eye, that all went away. We moved to a cloud, or we accelerated our movement to a cloud infrastructure. The other thing, and again, this was a trend that was really well on its way before COVID, but COVID has cemented its place as the preeminent, dominant way of doing things, is that there's really no applications. There's not even a lot of data, unless you're in some sort of government or other highly regulated environment where data has to stay local. The data is not even local. The app's not local. The data's not local. The users aren't local. So why should anything else be local, including security? So nothing's on-prem. I've heard some companies refer to this as SaaS ops, right? We live in the age where probably for all of you out here, I'm going to guess 80 to 90% of the applications you're using are SaaS-based applications, whether it be Office or Microsoft 365 for, common spreadsheets and Word documents, or the Google, analogs of them, or other kinds of applications, Salesforce, AWS, or whatever you're using, Adobe. They're all SaaS-based. And it's not just commercial off-the-shelf applications. Even the internal applications that we're developing at our enterprises are all now being hosted in the cloud for the most part. Now, an exception to this is mainframe. If you're working in a large financial institution, a large healthcare, perhaps a large government agency, you may still have your big iron, your IBM Z machine, and those, of course, aren't in the cloud. They're at the data center. But even there, we've seen such a transition of the integration between a cloud front end and that mainframe back end that you don't even know when you're on one versus the other as a user, right? And the security built into it is, look, the mainframe's always been the most secure infrastructure out there. So, and nothing is on-prem. We live in a SaaS ops world, and what does that mean? What does that mean for security, for DevSecOps? I'm going to get to that in a moment. At the same time, we fundamentally, even in DevSecOps, had the concept of a perimeter, right? We could build a perimeter. We used to have a perimeter around the LAN, and that kind of went away. And many of us moved to what we call micro perimeters, right? I could build a perimeter around my user or around a group, or I can conversely not build the perimeter around a person, build the perimeter around my application, or maybe I build my perimeter around my data. But never, there was always a perimeter that connotated us, them. We could use a zero trust methodology, right? But there were people inside the perimeter and then outside the perimeter. And that was a fundamental concept in our security. Well, with COVID and what we've seen and the amount of different devices and users logging on and how they're logging on, where they're logging on, and the need to make work get done, we've seen the perimeter just literally vanish. It's been vanishing, but we've seen it literally vanish below, right in front of our eyes. So this fundamental change, like everything else we see, it's created winners and losers in our DevSecOps landscape. And I wanted to spend the rest of my time right now talking about who some of these winners and losers are. So let's first look at the winners, right? And there are some real winners here. And you know, when I say winners, I think they're going to be rewarded financially in the market, but there are also technologies that you need to make sure you're on top of, that you're bringing these into your organization, especially, as I say, if you are part of that cloud transformation, DevOps movement and within the organization, and you have some responsibility for security, you need to be thinking about this. The first thing I wanted to bring up was identity and access management, right? As I said before, the domain has gone away, right? We don't have, first of all, we're not all using Windows laptops anymore. There's Macs, there's iPads, there's phones, there's people using machines that, you know, perhaps belong to their children or spouses, or and they're using them for school as well. And there's so many different permutations of what we used to think of as one person, one machine, one identity. That doesn't compute anymore. Today, we need an identity and access management system in our cloud-enabled DevOps environments that span all of the use cases, that span all of the places where we're computing from and where we are accessing to, right? So Active Directory back on a prem, or even Active Directory in the cloud, may not help us when we have to do hybrid or multi-cloud access, when we are accessing SaaS-based apps from 30 different providers, right? Single sign-on becomes important. The idea of and we've seen this now with, I've seen several vendors who do it, almost like a proxy where you have your identity here stored, you know, in the front end of that proxy, and then the proxy itself is on the back end, reaching out to all of the separate places where your identity has to come into play to give you access, what level of access you're getting, how you're getting access, right? All of this is tied into this next gen, the new normal identity and access management. So look for identity and access management solutions that enable your developers who are working remotely but nevertheless developing, that they get the access they need, that they don't spend a lot of their time fiddling with sign-on perhaps, but still it's secure, that you know who's getting on, what they're getting access to, and that they can get access across the entire infrastructure of your organization. Not just the server closet anymore, not just a few applications, but across the entire thing. This direct access, direct to cloud model signals the end of the domain. As we're going to talk about in the loser section, I think it also signals the end of backhauling all traffic back to the LAN from the WAN to go back out to the cloud. It really makes no sense. We're going to talk about that as well. I mentioned the term SaaSOps. What do I mean by it? What I mean by it is that your average user in your organization, if you're a DevOps-enabled organization, you've undergone, you know, or at least you're somewhere along the line in cloud transformation. If you're like most of the organizations in the world today, you're probably using something in the area of 25 to 30 SaaS-based applications. Each one of your users excuse my language, each one of your users are using a SaaS, but 25 to 30 SaaS applications. Crazy, you say? Sit and think about it. think about the applications you use on a daily basis, the applications the average user in your organization uses on a daily basis. And I think you'll find that 25 is even a conservative number. The interesting thing is that each of those 25 plus applications reside in a different place in the cloud, or in a different location. They're not all on your infrastructure. They're not all on your instance in AWS or Google or Azure. There might be some here, there, and everywhere. And every single one of those SaaS applications needs to have identity and user credentials for your users. They need to be secured, right? So that others can't log on and access it. And here's the important thing, and we're going to talk about it next: the data. One of the things I think we are learning, again, the hard way with COVID and the work from home, is that the data is king. We may not have a lot of control over what devices people are using to access our information. We may not have a lot of control over where they are. We hopefully have control over confirming their identity and their level of access management. But it is imperative that we own our data. I think the biggest new battlefront in DevSecOps is on data. There's this whole movement around data ops in DevOps itself, and data security is part and parcel of that. We must, in this new normal, understand where our data is, how it's protected, right? There are new encryption. Some of us are already looking at encryption technologies for a quantum world where we move from algebraic algorithms to geometric algorithms. And that's happening probably in the next 2-3 years. So we have to get ready for that new normal. But we must secure our data. We have to secure our data coming, going. Who accesses the data? What did they access? Where did they download any of it? Does the data remain up here and we just let people view it? How do we let them manipulate it? Data security is a fundamental new frontier in DevSecOps, and you need to get on top of that. Just as you do identity and access management and SaaSOps, data security. That's a triad there. Another area that I think is going to come out of this as a winner and that you need to start focusing on for your DevSecOps organization and plan is what I call life on the edge, right? As we move out, we move to the cloud, centralize things in the cloud away from on-prem. But at the same time, what we're seeing now is a move to the edge, where what maybe data stays centrally, but maybe some of these SaaS-based apps, in order to better deliver to all of the myriad of ways and places that people are accessing it, we need better edge computing solutions. And security or not, those edge computing solutions are coming, right? I think edge ops, if you want to call it that, is going to be a really hot area in this new normal, right? It's just the way of things in computing, right? If you're not moving forward, you're dying. We have been moving to this cloud central model now for 10, 15 years, right? And COVID has done nothing but tremendously accelerate it. But at the same time accelerating it, we're seeing a new evolution, which is we will always, we're going to have information in that cloud center, but we're going to be moving it to, or certain information and certain types of applications, and most importantly, certain types of security will be moved to the edge. So we might have sandboxes in the edge, a la something like a Zscaler or something like that. There are several great companies that are doing great stuff around the edge. Over on DevOps.com Security Boulevard, we've interviewed a bunch of them on our TechStrong TV show that plays 3 days a week. We've interviewed a lot of these. But be mindful, don't I think it's the job of my security friends out here who are in DevSecOps. Don't try to stop the revolution. Don't try to stop the new normal. Life on the edge computing is going to be an inherent part of that new normal. And it's our job to figure out how to do it securely. And so that's part of the new DevSecOps mantra. That's part of the new DevSecOps mission. And if you haven't already guessed it from what you've heard me talk about, I think DevSecOps, the mission of DevSecOps, is undergoing a tremendous change as a result of COVID. We're moving away from just shifting left and testing applications to how does security work in this new DevOps cloud transformative world. And that's DevSecOps, right? It's part of Dev Everything Ops. So life on the edge, really important. I wanted to mention another technology, and I had a good conversation with my friend Mo Rosen, who's the CEO of Guardian, or Digital Guardian, excuse me. And, we spoke about DLP. DLP, you say that? Yeah, that DLP. It's 15, 20 years old, and a lot of people thought it went away. But I think what we've seen as a result of this new normal is that technologies like DLP, technologies like NAC, Network Access Control, have had a renaissance, have had a rebirth. Because all of a sudden, we're not worried about someone taking data from my server closet database, but we are worried about who's accessing my data in the cloud and who's downloading it to their personal device, whatever that device may be. And then what happens to it? So the ability to make sure not only who comes on my network, but what comes on my network, and then what do they access and where do they take it, is more important than ever, and it's inherently part of the DevSecOps mission. And I think you need to take a second look at DLP and NAC and make sure what you've got there is up to speed. Let me mention another winner that I didn't put on here because I happen not to be fond of it and I don't recommend it. But nevertheless, I do think it's come out a winner as a result of this new normal, and that is monitoring employees. When we went remote here at Media Ops, as a CEO founder, I will tell you, I was nervous. Are people going to work? They're going to be home. Are they really going to put in a full day's work? Are we going to be as productive with everyone remote as we are with everyone in the office where I could see them? And the paranoia runs deep, right? And it took me a month to recognize that not only were we working or as productive as we were in the office, we were probably more productive. People were working harder. They weren't losing time commuting. They didn't shut off their computers at 5 o'clock, and we were getting tremendous amount of work done. And it made me rest easier as a CEO. There are a lot of organizations where the paranoia runs a lot deeper than that. And one of the things we've seen happen as a result of this new normal, of this COVID, is that we have this big brother is watching mentality where they're actually, DLP is one thing, but they're looking at every website you go to, how much time you're spending online, what files and how much time you spend with them, who you're chatting with, what you're zooming on, and everything else. And I get it. I get that people want to make sure that their employees are productive, that their employees are not doing anything potentially malicious, and everything else. But to me, it goes over the line very easily. And if you're using those kinds of tools, I think you got to be really cautious. You got to recognize your paranoia, and you have to know where do I draw the line on that, right? What is okay and what's invasive. Don't be big brother. Hopefully you've hired people who you're paying a decent wage to, and those people are adults. If you're worried about it, you've probably hired the wrong people. Now look, the insider threat is real, Anyone in security will tell you that. And you do need technologies and process programs in place to thwart the insider threat. I'm just saying be cautious. Don't go too far over that line, and because then it becomes an environment people don't want to work in, and that's an issue. So I don't have it on my winners list because I'm not fond of it, but certainly it's something people are looking at. Let's talk a little bit about the losers. And when I say losers, I guess it's relative, right? I said in the beginning of my talk today, I think selling commercial real estate or leasing commercial real estate is a loser in this new normal. But here are some of the others. VPN. I know what you might be saying. What, Alan? When we went remote, we had to buy so many more concentrator licenses and more VPN capacity. Well, you had to do that because that's what you were on before when this stuff happened, and that's the only way you know. But I think when we arrive at this new normal, and you start thinking to yourself, what sense does it make for someone who's remote to tunnel in to the office LAN, to then tunnel back out to the cloud, access applications, access data, tunnel that back into the office, to tunnel back out to their remote location? The bandwidth consumption, the cost of the tunnels, and just the latency is just, it makes no sense. It makes no sense. Now, I know a lot of you have invested a lot of money in your VPNs over the years, not just during COVID. But, you know, I remember talking to Jay Chowdhury, CEO, founder of Zscaler, and this was 8 years ago, 7 or 8 years ago. He said, Alan, 5-10 years from now, the idea of VPNing will be so ludicrous, no one's going to do it. And I think, again, COVID has hastened this, right? The whole new normal has shown us that what a wasteful way of allowing our employees who are remote to access remote assets, all the while having to go through this nexus of the LAN. It's gone. And so I would not be investing much in VPN. Once we were past that initial crisis point here, I think people start looking for direct-to-cloud access secure solutions. And that's tied into identity access management and proxies and so forth. Another area that I think is just done, and that's the traditional perimeter security. I think it's been dying a slow death for many years. But the idea of putting, a big firewall at your LAN or some, huge couple $100,000 box that's looking for, low and slow attacks and so forth, when no one's in the LAN there for them to attack and there aren't many assets there for them to attack, is just and I made my living in perimeter security for many years, but what a waste of money at this point of the game. We talk about DevSecOps. I think DevSecOps is almost the exact opposite of the perimeter security, right? DevSecOps mission is to go where the apps are, to go where the data is, to go where the modern software factory lives. And it's not about a perimeter. It's not even about a micro perimeter, because we have zero control over the endpoints that people are using to access today. And we were losing control for a long time, but again, COVID has just sealed this. We have people using their daughters' computers that they use for school to access stuff online. We have people using their spouses' computers or dual-use computers, or some machines they took from an office, maybe not. But it has signaled the end of the endpoint as we know it. And so traditional endpoint security, which was, putting it used to be antivirus, and then it became this endpoint bloated suite, which I haven't been a fan of for many years, it has just gone over and over time, right? There's really this COVID thing has shown us that investing more money in traditional endpoint security is probably as useless as investing more money in perimeter security. There's a new normal. There's a new way we have to do things. COVID has accelerated it, and it's a DevSecOps future. By the same token, I mentioned it earlier, the whole idea of managing our users around domains using Active Directory or, the similar kind of technology. I think the future's domainless. My friends at Jump Cloud talk about this a lot, and it makes a lot of sense. I wouldn't be investing a lot of money in that kind of technology anymore. And then, of course, so many of us have invested so much money in our internal data center security, whether we're talking about host-based intrusion detection, even physical security and everything else. That's done, right? DevSecOps is the future. We need to be investing in security in the cloud, security in the identity of our users, security in our data. Those are the places where we need to invest our money. That's where DevSecOps is going. And if you don't, you can join now or pay the price later, but that's where you have to go. That's it. I appreciate you taking the time to sit in with me today. I'd love to talk to anyone more about these particular issues. I have other ideas, but in 30 minutes, there's only so far we can get into things. But thank you. Thanks to Niladri Chuduri and the Zalorento people for putting on DevOps India Summit. I hope one day to be able to come to Bangalore and see you there in person at a future DevOps Enterprise Summit. But until then, this is Alan Schimmel for DevOps.com, MediaOps, Security Boulevard, and all the rest. Wishing you well, safety, health, and be strong, tech strong. Bye-bye.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
Hey everybody, happy Thursday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at MediaOps, and I'm here now with the headlines from across our sites. Today is the last day of DevOps World 2020, so CloudBees and other vendors have made some announcements in conjunction with the show. For one, the company announced it is embedding additional DevSecOps capabilities within its CI/CD platform that's based on the open source Jenkins projects. And it also plans to make 2 additional modules for its software delivery platform available. The first one is actually available now, and it unifies the management of feature flags across the entire application development lifecycle. While the second, which is expected to be available later this year, creates a system of record by tracking the progress of importing and normalizing all the data that's being made available within the tools that make up the DevOps platform. Instana is also making news at DevOps World. They made updates to its application performance management platform. That now includes tools for configuring, monitoring, and managing service level objectives that are based on a series of wizards that DevOps teams can employ to create a dashboard to monitor all the components that make up a specific application service. If you're in the DevOps space, obviously these tools are going to help your job tremendously. So what else is on DevOps.com? Well, we have from Bill Dorfeld, who's one of our premier freelance writers. He offers up ways that organizations can avoid shadow IT when they're introducing low-code technologies. we've been hearing a lot about low code lately. It's a very hot topic. Organizations are increasingly using low code applications to push or actually implement their digital transformation efforts in the wake of this COVID-19 pandemic. So there are so many different moving parts. In fact, actually, MediaOps is planning a low-code virtual summit later on this year. I think it's happening in early November, so please stay tuned on that. There's going to be lots of really great information about low-code. So over on Container Journal, we've got Mike Vizard, who is offering up the latest update to Red Hat's container storage platform. That's going to make it easier to access external data sources. It's version 4.5 of the Red Hat Container Storage Platform, and it now can provide container applications with the access to storage systems based on the open source Ceph object software storage software, sorry about that, which actually enables container applications that rely on the Red Hat Container Storage Platform to access storage, object storage platforms alongside the file and block systems. Also, we have an article about the benefits of an emerging technology called Cloud Security Posture Management, which, as I said, is an emerging technology for helping secure cloud-native environments. CSPM, as it's so lovingly known as, is a set of tools and practices that organizations can use to continuously manage cloud security risks. So it can be used to assess compliance, incident response processes, DevOps integrations, and operational monitoring effectiveness, easy for me to say, and risk assessment and visualization. It's really nifty technology, and if you are working in the cloud native space, definitely check this technology out if you get a chance. On Security Boulevard, we have Richie Jennings, who has pulled together his latest bloggy bits, his roundup on the zero logon vulnerability that's affecting Windows servers, Windows Active Directory servers. So much so that the federal government has mandated that all federal systems that are subject to this vulnerability be updated immediately. Big stuff there. So Richie has pulled it all together for us in his latest roundup. We also have an interesting perspective on how organizations that move beyond simple tabletop exercises in planning for data breach and expect the unexpected actually will be better positioned to recover once the inevitable happens, including ransomware attacks. It's a really, really fascinating article, one worth checking out. It's called What to Expect When You're Expecting a Data Breach. Okay, we have lots of news and information on all three of the sites, and more is being added daily. So please check back often to all of the sites and check back here on TechStrong TV Monday for more updates and roundups of our news headlines. I'll be back in a bit with a Thursday webinar preview, so stay tuned and stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at MediaOps, and I'm here now with Ryan Ellis, who's the Senior Vice President of Product Management at Salesforce, a platform at Salesforce. How are you, Ryan? Great to see you.
It's great to be here with you today, Charlene. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. How's COVID treating you these days? Pandemic.
You know, it's been rough for everybody, but we really can't complain too much. We live here in Santa Monica with my two kids. We have a swimming pool, which has been a wonderful thing for us in the summer, and just got a puppy. So life has been very busy for us.
That's good. Well, I think people need things to kind of keep their minds off what's going on in the world. So, but you know, unfortunately, there is reality, and you know, we've got to keep our eye on that too. But that's actually one of the reasons why we're getting together today. So wanted to talk to you a little bit about the low-code revolution that's kind of happening these days. It seems like a lot of organizations are noticing an increase in folks kind of tugging at the IT department sleeve, saying, you know what, just let me do this myself. I can do this myself. So especially when it comes to developing applications or just kind of workarounds for things, low code is kind of exploding as part of that. I think a lot of folks are recognizing that, for some things, they really can do it themselves. So what have you guys been seeing there at Salesforce in relation to low code for either within your organizations or within some of your partners and users?
Yeah, you're spot on there, Charlene. I mean, low code has definitely been taking off. We've been talking to our customers for many years about low code. We've offered low code capabilities as part of our platform for over a dozen years. And while we saw many people using it earlier on, and it was one of the major reasons they chose Salesforce, over this pandemic, what people were thinking of before is maybe digital transformations that might take them a few years. Now they're suddenly looking at having to do overnight. And that has just completely changed the game. In this kind of world, you can't spend a lot of time, hiring a bunch of developers and writing a lot of code that just frankly might not be what you need a week later when things in the world change. Right. And it's been amazing to see how our customers have been really changing and pivoting and trying new things and iterating using low code in ways that, truly they never really realized they could do before.
So what are they using low code for? I mean, are there certain examples of maybe applications or just maybe integrations that they're using it for?
Our customers are using it for a ton of different things. I'll give you a few great examples. So one is there's a company called Sunbasket, which is doing mail food delivery. And that's, of course, totally taken off during the pandemic with everybody staying at home. And they needed to get ahead of that surge of demand on their side. And so they turned to us and a feature we have, which is called Einstein Bots. It's a way to create essentially a bot that allows a person to interact online, maybe process their order, maybe ask for a change, maybe they want to find out the status of when it's being delivered. And this has been phenomenal for them because it's caused them to have an increase in 50% of their cases. So it's really dramatically allowed them to balloon and be able to handle more business, while at the same time, their customer engagement scores have been over 90%. And so they're incredibly excited and happy customers with what they've seen. Switching a little bit more to the virus itself, another example, totally different one, is that of UC Berkeley. So they have this genomics academic research lab. And this lab normally does work on things like CRISPR and whatnot, but they decided that they really needed to pivot and try to lend a hand to first responders and also the homeless and trying to get ahead of COVID-19 and getting tests available to them fast and available to doctors. And this is not their business at all. I mean, they are scientists, but it's not their business. And over the course of a weekend, they were actually able to use Salesforce's community capabilities, which is, again, a low-code technology, which allows you to set up, imagine a website where someone can come and get information, as well as fill in information about themselves. For example, go through one of those surveys that you might take to identify whether or not you have the symptoms of COVID. And then ultimately has allowed them to process over 1,000 COVID tests per day, helping out first responders and the homeless. And so we've been seeing these huge pivots and transformations for so many businesses. It's been really exciting.
That's great. That's great. So are there maybe particular profiles of folks who are using low code solutions now? I mean, are they maybe, people who, I don't know, in the marketing department or guys in HR or, who's using it?
That's one of the cool things about low code is that it's meant to be sort of a technology for everyone. And so it's much more around, what sorts of lines of businesses have problems they need to solve. Traditionally, IT has been great to work with, but IT has often had a huge backlog of demand for what they needed. And what low code, especially with Salesforce, provides is it allows for much more of a sort of virtuous circle between the business side as well as with IT. So we see some of our customers, for example, Citrix has done an amazing job of really expanding their normal traditional IT workforce with a whole group of about 150, what they refer to as citizen developers within their company. Right. And these are people from a whole different variety of markets, maybe in their sales or marketing or HR or so on. And they're really representing what their business needs. They then work with IT, they build these low-code solutions, but they're still vetted by IT so that they can make sure that they're still following things like PII rules, making sure they're in compliance with their company's regulations, making sure that they're still doing things in a secure way. But they get velocity because there's just a much larger workforce, and they also really deeply understand the problems they're trying to solve.
Yeah, I think that's critical in the success of any solution, basically. But we've been talking about low code for a couple of years now, low code and citizen developers and the solutions, the rise of the solutions. But it really seems like it has exploded with the advent of the pandemic. Do you think that this is kind of fundamentally change the way applications are developed, or maybe if not developed, at least the way organizations approach application development?
Yeah, I think this is one of those pandemic things when we say, what's going to happen after the pandemic, and are we going to go back to the way things were? And I don't think this is a go back to the way things were. I think that companies, businesses all around the world are having their eyes opened up to what low-code can do for them in terms of turnaround time, in terms of iteration, in terms of bringing the business closer to the problems at hand. And I think that we're just going to see a big explosion there. Just to throw out a stat for you, I think Gartner says that by 2024, something like 65% of all application development they think is going to be done through low code. And I think that they're probably not far from wrong. We've seen huge increases in many of our own low-code technologies. As an example, we have a capability here at Salesforce, which is called Flow, which allows you to automate a business process. So imagine, for example, it's now COVID and I want to process a loan for PPP. That's maybe a multi-step thing where I'm collecting a lot of information from you. And maybe there's a lot of pivots in how I need to collect that information depending upon the way you answer your questions. A tool like Flow gives you the low-code capability to design that whole workflow and then change it over time as maybe the rules have changed, because they've changed pretty frequently as that program has changed. But as an example, that particular capability, this executing of screen flows, we're now seeing over 200 million screen flow executions per month. So this is a dramatic rise over where we were even just a few months ago, where it was around 160 million. So there's huge upswings that we're seeing all over the place. That bot capability I mentioned has had a 2x increase in just, if you look at March to April, so basically the very beginning of the pandemic, really was like a 2x increase in the usage of it overall. So people are really turning to these capabilities today.
That's great to hear. That's great to hear. And when you think about the velocity of applications and just the speed at which organizations are moving to address the needs of their users, especially during the pandemic, I think we have reached a pivot point, basically, where we're going to see just a continual increase in the speed and just the way organizations are approaching their application development and delivery efforts, and just finding the best way to get what their users need to them the fastest way possible. So obviously low code solutions are a great way to do that. So Ryan, thank you so much for having the conversation with me. I expect we're going to be hearing a lot more about low code in the next few months. Easy for me to say, but thanks again for your time. Really appreciate it.
Anytime. Great to be here with you, Charlene. Take care.
All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community, digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at MediaOps, and I am here now with the Thursday edition of the webinars preview. As always, we have so many great webinars coming up on DevOps.com and Security Boulevard, so I wanted to let you know about some of the 3 that are happening soonest so that you can make plans accordingly. The first webinar I want to let you know about is called 0 to 1,000 plus applications, large-scale CD adoption at Cisco with Spinnaker and OpenShift. This one happening September 25th at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. It's sponsored by Red Hat Marketplace and OpsMX. This webinar is a case study of sorts featuring Cisco Systems. Yes, that's Cisco, as it embarked on its cloud-native journey and needed to modernize its software delivery process. So we have speakers from Cisco, OpsMX, and Red Hat to discuss the challenges and lessons learned, as well as some of the best practices gleaned from Cisco's CD transformation journey. Definitely one you don't want to miss. The next webinar is called Solving the Achilles Heel of DevOps Quality and Speed with Test Environment Management. This one is happening Tuesday, September 29th at 11 a.m. Eastern on DevOps, and it is sponsored by Plutora. We have Mark Hornbeek and Jeffrey Kais of Plutora on this webinar. They're going to be looking at the challenges that are associated with improving how the pre-production environments are managed and automated, and how test management techniques, easy for me to say, test management techniques can help now and in the future. Definitely one worth checking out if you're having any issues with your pre-production pipeline and want to know about test management. The next webinar I want to let you know about is happening also Tuesday, September 29th. This one is happening at 3 p.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard. It's called Step-by-Step Guide to Protecting Web Apps with Google reCAPTCHA. This one is sponsored by a company called Chronicle. So in the webinar, the folks at Chronicle will offer a deep dive on how easy and effective it is to leverage reCAPTCHA Enterprise, including such things as how to reduce login attempts by approximately 90% without reducing user engagement, and using reCAPTCHA Enterprise to protect websites from some of OWASP's most challenging web automated attacks. Good stuff, good stuff. Definitely worth checking out. All right, I'll be back on Monday with the next edition of the webinars preview. So until then, please have a great weekend and stay safe.
Hey, thanks, Charlene. Great job on the news today, as well as the webinar preview and your interview with Ryan Ellis. Now it's time for the Analyst Corner with Mitch Ashley, CEO, founder of Accelerated Strategies Group. Mitch will also just give a great keynote at DevOps World this week, if you didn't have a chance to catch that. And Mitchell today talks with Alex Hidalgo, who just joined Noble 9. Alex, of course, is a well-known SRE expert, thought leader. And he's also going to discuss a little bit about, how every piece of data is valuable to someone. So it's a good conversation. Let's head over now to the Analyst Corner with Mitch.
Welcome to Analyst Corner. Mitch Ashley, CEO at Accelerated Strategies Group. This week, as you know, at least for me, this week is DevOps World. I'm involved in a lot of activities with the conference. And one of the things that I was part of today was actually a panel discussion with press and other analysts talking about a number of topics, some really great questions that came up from that. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting that I wanted to share with you was the topic of compliance and governance and audits, things like that. And how is DevOps fitting into that picture? CloudBees, who is the sponsor of DevOps World, had a session. It may have been them or one of their customers talking about some of the audit features in their automation tools. And so in response to some of the questions from the press, it reminded me of something I wanted to talk about here. And that is, if you think about DevOps, you think about behaviors and adoption patterns of organizations, and the topic of compliance, which I think we're going to hear more and more about this in the DevOps world and the tools that we use with DevOps. We're very interested, of course, of how do we increase adoption of processes, practices, and also tools across the organization. Most organizations want fewer versus more. Sometimes that's at odds with what developers want, who like lots of flexibility. But there's some interesting conversations that can happen around that, adopting corporate tools or standards that we've adopted. And of course, there's things of sharing knowledge and scripts or other automations or infrastructure that's in place. There's lots of good reasons to do that. And sometimes there are reasons not to. But I think one of the increasing reasons will be there's a lot of data now that gets kind of thrown off in the process of automation in creating software, whether it's scanning of code that gets checked in or a test or runtime environment for security vulnerabilities or code quality, just like tying the feature capability flow through the development process, the software delivery process, and what features are where in the process, building kind of that value stream or value mapping information. Software development should be a data-driven process, just like other parts of the business. At least we want it to be that way, because there's lots of benefits to that. It certainly supports a continuous improvement mindset. And how do you know what to improve? Well, you use data to identify and then validate that you are making improvements. But another potential benefit that increasing we'll see, and this is where I think we'll hear more about in DevOps tools, and that is the information that's in that software creation flow, those pipelines, that workflow. Some of that is really valuable and important to help you get through an audit process. Let's just take, for example, a security audit. The traditional way is you do everything you do to create the software, then you go fill out the audit form or the checklist or whatever compliance mechanism that you're using, either internal or external. And it can be an arduous process, right? You're stepping back, you're going back, looking at things you did, things that have already happened, explaining what happened, et cetera. Some of that information actually is already retained within logs and information in our tools, in our automation, in our workflow, in our CI/CD, and in our deployment tools. And that information can then be packaged up and used in automation, in compliance reporting. So imagine talking with someone about, you can go choose your own tools and figure out how you're going to satisfy all the audit requirements. You can leverage the tools that we've got, because we've already kind of solved that issue, and have the ability to take that information directly out of the tools and provide it to you. You've got a good bit, maybe a majority of the work done to meet some of the audit compliances, just taking security as one. So I think this idea of audit compliance and how DevOps tools, that can be a real benefit to development teams who don't want to stop and be disrupted by administrative processes. So think about that as you're working on your automation, your workflow, your pipelines, and how you can leverage that information for auditing, but of course, with continuous improvement as well. Thanks for listening.
Control to Major Tom. your CI/CD pipe and put your observability on. Ground control to Major Tom.
10, 9.
Commencing countdown, engines on.
6, 5.
Check ignition and may God's love be with you.
This is Major Tom to Ground Control. DevOps Command is here to say, I have a great way for you to engage today. DevOps looks very different, but not to worry. We have KK to show you the way, and Batya Galoop has something to say. And more. DevOps Experience 3 is coming your way October 22nd. And as it has been since the first, it's virtual. We know everything's virtual today, but this one is designed virtual from the start, and it's free as it should be. We have great speakers beyond KK and Batya Galoop, along with lots of learning and interactive chat, expo halls. We're going to be covering CI, CD, observability, GitOps, SRE, tools, the humans of DevOps, and some surprises too. Sign up today at DevOpsExperience.com. DevOps Experience is going to go where no DevOps conference has ever gone before, and the force will be with you. So can you hear me, Major Tom? Can you hear me, Major Tom? See you at DevOps Experience, October 22nd, DevOpsExperience.com.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Well, I'm joined by Alex Hidalgo, who is actually joining Noble 9. And there's been some kind of buzz about this because he's an expert. I would call him an expert in the SRE field, which is a hot topic too. Great to talk with you, Alex.
Thanks so much.
So tell us, just give folks a little bit of your background prior to coming to Noble 9, and then we can get into some of the things that you're going to be doing at the company.
Sure. I spent a long time in the tech industry in general, doing various things, but became an SRE about a decade ago when I joined Google. That happened almost by accident. I was hired by a company called AdMeld as a technical operations engineer, which is a little more sysadmin-y, and 3 months later, they were acquired. And suddenly I was at Google, and suddenly my title was SRE, and I didn't really know what was going on. But as I learned more about the discipline, it really spoke to me. It's really, I almost can't imagine how I did anything else. Spending a little over 7 years at Google, left to join Squarespace. Spent almost exactly 2 years there. One of my primary focuses there was to help Squarespace adopt an SLO-based approach, a service level objective-based approach to reliability. I feel like I made a ton of progress there. And while focusing on this so much, I decided to write a whole book about the topic. To be totally honest, it started with a conversation with my coworker, and I was just kind of lamenting that there wasn't a book. And he said, well, you should write it. And I said, no, we need a real expert to write it. And he said, you are the expert.
Yeah.
Because I suddenly realized as soon as he said those words that I was now writing a book. And that was just released on September 15th.
Well, congratulations on that. I assume it's on Amazon and all your good book online locations to grab that. What's the name of it?
Implementing Service Level Objectives, published by O'Reilly Media. And yeah, you can find it anywhere books are sold. Personally, I would love for people to go to bookshop.org. That's a way to help support your local independent bookstores. But of course, you can order it wherever you'd like.
Well, again, congratulations. I've not written a book, but I've had many friends who have. And it's sort of a love passion that you have to really make it through that whole process. So it's a labor of love, but it's a lot of work.
It was certainly probably the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. I will not pretend otherwise. There were more tears of frustration than tears of joy, but luckily there were both. Now that I'm on the other end of it, incredibly proud of the work. It's been generally well received so far, and overall, I'm glad I did it. I don't know when I do another one, but it was quite an experience.
This is one of those you can always put author at the end of your whatever list of accomplishment. And to tell you the truth, that comes with some notability and credibility. So I think that'll be a great thing for you to have, just my opinion. But so tell us about Noble 9 and why you decided to make the jump to Noble 9.
So for years now, my focus has been on service level objectives. Even before I left Google, my last role there was on the CRE team, the Customer Reliability Engineering team. And this was a team that engaged Google's largest cloud customers and basically taught them how to SRE, in a sense. And one of the rules the CRE team had was that you had to adopt SLOs or we couldn't work with you. The idea was this is the common language that we need before we can teach you other things. And so with that, and then my time at Squarespace and writing the book, SLOs have been just about my entire professional life for the last 4 or 5 years or so. And one of the reasons why is because I truly believe in them. When they're implemented well, they truly make people happy. I think about this stuff so much that I once had a dream about setting SLOs for my dog in terms of how often he, takes walks and things like that. It doesn't really make sense, but the point is, this is stuff I live and breathe, and I truly love it. And there's a number of companies out there that are providing SLO tooling that are helping people measure these things correctly. A lot of people have to build this in-house, and more monitoring solutions and observability tools are giving you some amount of SLO tooling. But Noble 9 is the only one out there that is focused on this entirely. Their entire product is based around SLOs. It's not something that's being added on to a different monitoring solution. And that mission just spoke to me. And so when we kind of discovered each other, and I remember when I saw a demo of their product, and it's still very beta, it's so early. Just watching the demo, all I could think was, you give me a blank document and 7 days, and I've got your 3-year roadmap. I instantly imagined, yes, this is great. And then we add this here, and we could add this here. And so just the overall mission, the overall drive to really help people understand and how to implement service level objectives, the educational aspects that go along with that, it just spoke to me. And it just seemed like the right time to make the move.
So let's give folks a definition. Obviously, you've written the book, so no better source to go to than you. So give us a definition of SLO.
So a service level objective is generally a target percentage for how often you want to be reliable for your users. You can't be perfect. 100% is impossible, especially with computer systems. Other engineering disciplines know this. Everything's built to maybe fail one day, but hopefully not too often, right? You don't want bridges falling down all the time, but
failures happen.
For maintenance on that, right? Yeah. The example I always like to give that I think most people can instantly wrap their head around is, imagine a media streaming service. I won't pick one, right? But, and you sit down to watch a movie and it takes 3, 4, 5 seconds to buffer, and you're fine with that. That's already an instance of something not being perfect and the user being okay, but we can extend it further. Sometimes it takes 20 seconds to buffer, and you're annoyed about that in that moment. But as long as it only takes 20 seconds to buffer, let's say 1 in 100 times, you're not going to cancel your subscription and move to a different service if you're otherwise happy with it. But if it takes 20 seconds to buffer every single time, you'd probably abandon that and go somewhere else. So that's basically what service level objectives are. In that example, if you're okay with it failing 1 in 100 times, you can set a reliability target of, should buffer within 5 seconds 99% of the time. That's the general concept. And it can get very complicated for complex computer systems, of course. That's why there's an entire book. It's not always easy, but the concepts are pretty simple. You can't be perfect. No one actually needs you to be perfect anyway. So just be good enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a closest analog, which is somewhat similar, is service level agreements, usually at a macro level, like with a network service provider or some organization that you're buying software services from. So this is really taking it a whole nother level deeper, getting into really the delivery of the application to end users, to maybe internal customers, product people that you're making agreements of what you're going to meet, so you know how much to invest to get it to that level of reliability, stability, with performance. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. They're similar topics. I don't speak about SLAs generally because they operate in a different sense. You violate an SLA and you owe someone something. There's some kind of recompense, credit, or an actual check sometimes. And you're correct, SLAs have been around for a long time. Telcos were already using them in contracts back in the 60s and 70s. In some of my research, I found a UN document dating to 1948, I believe, that used the term. I once found a job listing for a punch card operator in Boston in the 1920s that used the term. And there was interesting because it wasn't even about an electronic or even vaguely telco system. It was literally, if you take this job, you promise to perform at this service level. So yeah, that's a concept that's been around a long time, and you do some of the measurements the same, but I generally think of them as very different tools. An SLA tells you, are we going to lose this customer or do we owe them money? An SLO tells you, are we being reliable enough for users? And a user, that's the term I always use, but what I mean with a user, it could be a customer, it could be someone paying, it could be someone using a free product, it could be an internal user, it could be a coworker, or it could even be another service. In complex services, microservice architectures, we always have services talking to other services, and those are users too. It's just easier to have a single term to talk about all of them. That's kind of what sets it apart. An SLA is tied to a contract, and an SLO, individual teams, even working on a small microservice that's only depended upon by one other team that sits down the hall from you, you can still use these concepts to ensure that if you're measuring things correctly, that you're being reliable enough for those users.
Yeah, sometimes the challenge of setting goals and objectives, things like a SLO, can be just sort of the fear of committing to something we don't know how we're going to achieve yet. I assume that's true with SLOs. How do you help folks get past that? We understand we don't know how to get there. That's part of the process of figuring that out, but you need to know where you're going.
100%. So a thing that I always try to explain to people pretty upfront is that it's an objective and not an agreement. There's no contract in place. You can change your targets. As long as your target is still at a level that is not burning out your team by trying to be too reliable, or you're not spending too many resources, and on the other side of things, your users are still happy with your target, change it if you need to. You're almost certainly going to pick the wrong target at first, and that's fine. Update it once you have more data. Or things about the world change. Maybe you need to make your target more stringent now because the user requirements have changed, or maybe you can loosen it. Sometimes you have to. Maybe something that you're dependent upon now performs less reliably, and that means that you now have to perform less reliably. And sometimes that's totally fine. They're objectives. They can move, they can change, and in fact, they should. There's an entire chapter in the book, I think it's almost 9,000 words, just about SLO evolution. When should you change your targets? How do you change your targets? What signals can you gather to know that you should change targets? So committing to an SLO-based approach, it can sometimes seem scary to people because they often think of them as the same as being SLAs, but that's not the case. If they need to change, they can. That doesn't mean they always have to. Sometimes you pick a very good target and your team's happy and your users are happy and product is happy and the business is happy, and then maybe you don't have to change anything at all, but you can if you need to.
Great. I think that's a really good explanation, thinking of it as objectives as opposed to sort of pass or fail. I'm going to meet this contractual agreement. I'm curious, are SLOs and an SRE role synonymous one-on-one, or can you do a full SRE job without doing SLOs? How do they fit together? How dependent are they?
It depends so the platonic ideal, the kind of original definition as outlined by, Ben Traynor at Google and the first Google SRE book especially, and the basis of the CRE team and things like that. Yes, SLOs are the bedrock of how site reliability engineering works. Site reliability engineers want to make things reliable, and the general thought is that an SLO-based approach gives you the best data to find out if you're reliable or not. That being said, the term and the role, SRE, it's expanded, it's grown, it now belongs to the industry. And there are plenty of people out there doing great work that don't have SLOs implemented. There are SRE teams at Google that don't. Many do, but it's tricky. If you want to talk about, again, kind of a platonic ideal, the exact definition, kind of you need SLOs. Practically in the real world, probably not. I still think they are your best option for how to measure things, but you can absolutely do your job, I think, without them.
Yeah, it seems like any good approach, methodology, whatever you might call it, like whether it be Agile or DevOps or SRE, SLO, it's never about the strict definition. It's about the application to your environment. Because, let's say, for example, you're in a manufacturing or drug manufacturing, something like that, where you might have quality kind of training and continuous improvement principles. I would think if that's the culture you're in, leverage that, read your book, apply some of the additional things unique to software and reliability and SLOs, call it whatever you want, but you're effectively getting there in a way that your organization is compatible with and will adopt.
Yeah. Two things I mentioned in the book is, first, in the preface, before people even get to the meats, I remind them this is just a model. The map is not the territory. This is the way of thinking, and that is the important part. You don't have to adopt everything as described in the book. And even everywhere in the book, the words are constantly couched around this is an example, this is an idea, this is something that's worked for me. Use that, but use it in the best way for you and your team and your organization and your business. And the other thing is that, so the way the whole system works, you have service level indicators, SLIs, and that's just a bit of telemetry that tells you, hopefully, is this service doing what it's supposed to be doing? Because that's what reliability really is. People often conflate reliability and availability and things like that, but reliability means, is this thing doing what it's supposed to be doing? And if you can measure that, that's all that's really important. That's really what's important. Are you measuring what your users care about? SLOs and error budgets, which are just a way of thinking about your SLO performance over time, they're just pre-done math to help you think about this better. But really, it's the SLIs that matter. Are you thinking about your users? Are you putting them first? Are you measuring things from their perspective? And then, again, you can use some math. You can use target percentages and error budget calculations to help you reason about this. But I think you're most of the way there if you just have SLIs. Use that data to have discussions and make decisions about what your focus should be.
The principle, if you can't improve what you can't measure, right? Starts with that. I grew up, growing up, I did some construction, and my foreman always said, good enough for who it's for. And what he meant was, it's the customer's expectations. Doesn't mean it's perfect. They may be satisfied with 80% of the solution or 95, but that's who matters. And I think that's what you're talking about, of setting these SLIs, right? We're not shooting for perfection.
Yeah. Most other businesses know this. This feels new to tech because for whatever reason, this industry has decided to try to be perfect or to try to hit 100%. And luckily that's changing with adoption of these kind of principles. But everyone I've talked to, friends that work in entirely different industries, every single person I've talked to have been like, oh yeah, I do that. Like a good example, a bartender at my local bar, I told him I signed a book deal. And he's like, well, what is it about? So I told him. He was like, oh yeah, like I do that. I try to greet every customer within 30 seconds if they walk up to the bar. That's what I intend to do. Now, I can't always do that because sometimes it's a very busy Friday night and things are backed up and I can't. But I know if I can do that often enough, then I'm not going to lose customers. They're not going to go away. And, if you have to wait 2 minutes for a drink every once in a while, people are still going to be okay with that as long as it isn't too often. I'm like, exactly. And there's a story in the preface about how I told this to my hairstylist. And she was like, oh yeah, I do that. And, every single person I talk to, everyone already kind of does this. It's a little bit more complicated with computers. You need a little bit more math and things like that. But don't let the great be the enemy of the good. We already have phrases that capture the basic philosophies.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious that, it's great because you're both a practitioner as well as an author of the book. What are some of the pitfalls that folks typically might bump into, maybe they could avoid if they learned them from you?
Sure. I think the biggest things are people think that SLOs are like a thing you do. They're not. They're a different approach. They're a different way of thinking about reliability, a different way of measuring your reliability. And people don't often know that. Someone decides, a director of an engineering department puts an OKR for Q3 and says every team must have 2 SLOs or something like that. And then teams go do it. And then like, now what do I do with this? That's the trickier part. That's the part that's not always explained. That's, again, part of the reason why the book exists. Almost everything that had been written about SLOs before told you how to do it, but not what you could do with that data once you have it. So that's the biggest thing. People not understanding this is a forever process. It's a different approach. It's closer to something like Agile to help you manage your sprints than it is to. It's definitely not something you just check off a list and say I'm done now.
You in your thought there, you mentioned the phrase OKR. I think that comes out of KPIs, which is sort of the Intel method of key performance indicators, objective and key results. Is that kind of weaved in this way to easily adopt it, or is that more just kind of the background that you're used to applying it to?
A lot of that is my background. Google very famously has pretty stringent OKRs. Squarespace actually uses them as well. So for most of my career, I've been kind of tied to them. And I think so because, again, this is data you use to make decisions with. That's what it really is. And I've seen plenty of teams. On my previous team at Squarespace, we would review our SLO status in our weekly sync. And if we noticed something was off, we would then assign an engineer to work on that for the next week instead of potentially their previously scheduled project work. I've seen entire organizations set their OKRs for a quarter, their objectives for a quarter, by looking at how their SLOs performed over the previous quarter. How have we been? Where do we need to focus? So yeah, they're a planning tool as much as anything else.
What I like about that, not that everybody has to do KPIs and OKRs, but the philosophy with that is it doesn't all happen in one time window. You can have KPIs, OKRs that are going out for a couple of years. It doesn't have to be done today. I'm curious about the visibility of SLOs. I feel like I'm doing acronym soup here, but you talked about the bartender or hairstylist having them. They probably don't tell people that very often unless a conversation like yours strikes up. How visible, how public should you be about SLOs? Because that can also be sort of a thing to get over of, well, I don't want too much going out there because I'm not comfortable yet about whether that's a goal we can hit.
It depends. It's so unique going from organization to organization or service to service. Do you want to publish them externally? Maybe not. Probably depends on your company culture and what your legal departments and your marketing departments want. Should you publish them internally? 100%. They're an incredibly powerful tool for communicating to other people who may depend on your service. If they don't know what your SLO status is or what your targets are, it makes it more difficult for people that depend on you to set their own targets or know how reliable they've been. They're also incredibly important for reliability reporting. Just how have we performed over this month, quarter, full year? Once you have this data, you can look at things in a totally different way and make even large-scale organizational decisions, based off of that. They also just function better than other approaches, especially if you're talking about like a customer-facing outage. Often the first approach people will have is they'll start counting incidents. And they'll say, oh, well, we had 20 customer-facing incidents in Q1. Let's aim to only have 10 in Q2. And so then you only have 10 in Q2, except they were actually lengthier than the 20 you had in total time. So that was actually a worse quarter from your customer's perspective. So, okay, so we can't just count incidents and then people add something like mean time to remediation or mean time to repair or mean time to fix. There's dozens of these acronyms. and think, okay, cool, now we got it. If we know what the average time is, but that still doesn't work, because if you have a few very lengthy ones versus 100 short ones, the mean will tell you the 100 short ones that quarter was actually better than the one where you only had a handful of very long ones. And so then what do you do? And that's exactly what SLOs give you. They give you, via your error budget, via your calculation of how things have acted over time, they just give you a much better view. So that's a great example of the way that they should be visible, because they can be used, all the way up to the C-level to understand how have we performed in the eyes of our customers.
Ask you then, a couple of ways people often set objectives is, one is to kind of shoot high, shoot big, go for the stretch goal. And there can be pros and cons to that. It can create sort of the creative tension to help you really achieve greater things. It can also backfire if suddenly that's the expectation and now you've failed because you're far from it. The other way is to measure where you are, think of the next increment you think you can make in a certain time period, and kind of continuously do that incremental approach. I'm guessing you would probably advocate for the latter, or am I on track there?
Yeah, there are a few pitfalls to trying to be too good. Exactly as you said, let's say you do hit 5 nines, right? Like that's the term for 99.999%, which is essentially unattainable. Maybe if you're a Google or an Amazon for certain things, but the resources required for that are just generally absurd. But even let's say you have a service and you had a few lucky quarters and you've hit that. Previously, perhaps your users were actually okay if you had been performing at, let's say, 99.9%. But now they've been running at 5 nines instead of 3 nines for 6 months. User expectations have changed, and now they may no longer be happy if you're suddenly running at 3 nines. So that's the first pitfall, right? You don't want to be too perfect. You want to be good enough, because if you're too perfect for too long, people are going to expect that, and then you may have real trouble continuing to hit that target. The other thing, talking about kind of incremental, yeah, I love that. So many times, that's how I've actually fixed the service. It can be difficult to convince people, hey, we need to drop our project work. We need to fix this. This is a problem. But SLOs can give you great data. Set them aspirationally. Measure things for a while. A great story. I gave a talk about this with my coworker Alex Lee at SRECon Europe last year. We maintained the ELK, the Elasticsearch logging infrastructure at Google, and we knew we had a problem. We knew it. Our users were unhappy. We were out of ideas. We just kind of gave up on it in a way. And as people do, we were completely burnt out. And the way this ended up being kind of fixed is, well, we set an actual SLI, end-to-end latency. How long does it take on average for a log line to be processed and to be available for user querying? And once we had that, we measured it for a while, and we realized we were being reliable about, I believe it was like 85% of the time, something pretty atrocious. And so what we did was we set an SLO target, I believe it was just 99%. Only 99% of logs will on average be processed within, I think it was 5 minutes at first. And we blew through our error budget, I believe it was 27 hours. Barely a day passed before we had a data point that we can now all point to and say, yes, we need to focus on this. Mm-hmm. So the whole team dropped their project work, and we spent a month. And we finally discovered, we discovered 5 or 6 problems, of course, right? There's never a root cause. It's always a bunch of little contributing factors making things bad. And we fixed things one by one. And it was actually a really rewarding experience for the whole team to work together on the same project for, a fairly extended period of time. And then once we'd been running well for a while, we set our target to within 2 minutes instead of 5, and 99.9% of the time instead of 99%. And that was a good example of one, incrementally getting closer to what our users actually wanted, because they weren't really happy with the concept of 99, but they knew that was a decent first step. That was a decent first goal to have. And once we reached it, well, then we bumped it up, and now we had a new aspiration.
Excellent. Well, this has been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed talking with you, and it seems like a great thing to contribute to the expert body of knowledge as well as practices for DevOps and Agile and the software that we create. Congratulations on the new book. Everybody can check it out on Amazon. And what did you say was the other site you like folks to visit?
Bookshop.org. They've been instrumental during this whole pandemic. They ensure that a certain amount of proceeds go to independent bookstores. You can even select your exact local store and ensure that they get a certain percentage of the sales. So that is very near and dear to my heart. I do not want to live in a world without small businesses like that.
I agree. I'll have to check that out. I have not used them before. Appreciate it. I also noticed, by the way, you were mentioning applying SLOs to your dog. You have a dog on the cover of your book. Maybe that made it on there. A sort of Freudian slip there.
You famously don't really get a say. O'Reilly picks it. It's a very opaque process. It's mysterious, and everyone who writes a book with them is awaiting the day to find out what is my animal. There's a thing to talk about online. What is my animal going to be? And I actually have a 5 to 10 year plan to perhaps exit tech and open a dog rescue. They really are one of the things that is nearest and dearest to me. And when I suddenly got an email and out of the blue, and I was like, "Here's your cover," and I saw a dog, I cried. It was very special and a great little bit of faith there.
My wife and I actually participated in a dog rescue as well. So wish you the best with that. Alex, thank you very much. What's your title at Noble 9?
I am their principal site reliability engineer.
Excellent. So join me in thanking Alex Dialgo, who is just joining Noble 9, and wish you the best in your new role, as well as with the book.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Join topic experts and peers for a Splunk virtual event. Observability to enable your digital initiatives. Are your apps and services distributed in the cloud, getting refactored as microservices, or becoming more complex? If they are, you must factor in observability. Observability is all your data to help you find unexpected failure conditions, explain why they happen, and resolve them fast. This event is about the challenges, opportunities, and best practices to successfully build observability into everything you develop, deliver, or monitor. Register today.
That's going to wrap it for this beautiful Thursday here, September 24th. We are not live tomorrow. We'll be having a repeat of one of our better shows, but I will be back, God willing, on Monday, and with more fresh content and interviews and information. Until then, everyone, have a great weekend. Stay safe, stay well, stay strong, tech strong. This is Alan Schimmel. We're out.